Speakers are men who have at least 6 months of current abstinence. Everyone except the speaker should mute themselves now so we don't have any background noise. Our speaker tonight is Ken T. And Ken, after 15 minutes, our timer, who is Dave C., he'll let you know when you have 15 minutes. And he'll give you a little buzzer warning in 5 minutes before the 20-minute limit. And please make sure everyone's unmuted. And we asked you about recording. You said okay, so you can go ahead and speak. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all. Hi, my name's Ken T. from Orange County, California. I'm a compulsive overeating alcoholic, and thanks for letting me share at your meeting tonight. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, so what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. What it was like about, well, since I was a child, you know, like the book talks about, I progressively gained weight over time, you know, and gained weight through high school. Joined the Marine Corps right after high school. Did 4 years, almost got kicked out for being overweight. I could pass all the physical tests, but I didn't look quite right in the uniform, and they almost discharged me on that. But I was able to get out in time and beat that. And then for several years after that, I just continued to gain weight. And towards the end, towards the late, like from like 95 to 2000 or so, I started getting these infections in my legs. I was probably about 150 pounds overweight, and I would get cellulitis in my legs. And about once a year, I'd be hospitalized because of that. And of course, the doctors would tell me, you know, you need to lose weight and so forth. And I would, you know, not listen, do my thing, and just compulsively overeating, you know, gaining weight, getting sick, diabetes set in, and so forth. And I did that for several years. And then finally, the last time it happened was about 6 months before I got introduced to program. And I had spent about a week in the hospital, and, you know, IV in each arm. My leg was heavily infected. And the doctor told me that they couldn't control the infection, and the cocktail of antibiotics that they had me on was creating a secondary infection. And so they had to take me off the antibiotics. And when they did that they were going to amputate my right leg. And I decided at that point that if they did that I was going to go home, load my gun, and be done with it, you know. And not only was I suicidal, but I was losing my job. I was being evicted from my apartment. You know, the IRS was garnishing my wages because to eat like that, drink the way I was, it's expensive. And so I had a lot of financial issues. So besides my health, my life was just a wreck, you know. And if you'd had asked me how I got there, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I just had bad luck, I guess. And so I thought, you know. And so anyway, they took me off the antibiotics, and it was divine intervention. You know, my fever broke. And I remember the doctor coming in and telling me that he didn't understand. This shouldn't be happening. That's what he told me. He said, "You're a very lucky man." And I was released the following evening from the hospital, and that's was my medical condition, you know, coming into the program. And still had no idea how I had got there. I couldn't explain it, other than I just had, you know, stroke of bad luck, things like this. And so I was dating a woman who was sober at the time, and I was going to AA meetings with her, not to work a program or anything like that, but I began to relate to the people. And I mentioned to her one day that although I didn't think I was alcoholic, but I could relate to their disruption of life and things like this. And so she told me, she said, "Well, I've noticed, Ken, that you're morbidly obese and you have all these physical issues, and so forth. She goes, there's another program called Overeaters Anonymous, like AA, and they deal with eating issues, disorders. She goes, you should go find a meeting and see what you think. So I did. I went to my first meeting in LA. I related. I met some people, made some friends, and called my girlfriend up, and she said, well, what did you think of the meeting? And I said, yeah, I liked it. And she goes, good. Now, she goes, here's the deal. She goes, you need to get a sponsor, work the steps, and you and I are done. And I was like, what? Because we had been dating for several years at this point. Not quite, a year and a half, something like that, 2 years. And she goes, yeah. She goes, you need to work the program, and you're gonna change when you go through this process. So of course, all this was news to me. I didn't quite understand what she was saying, but I did get a sponsor and continued to go to meetings, and that's what I recommend to people is you have to get a sponsor, and you got to work your steps, follow direction, and in my story, when I got my first sponsor, I split my time between, I was living in Orange County and working in LA, and my first meeting was in LA, but I switched to Orange County for meetings and such, and so I met a guy who asked to be my sponsor. He spoke at a meeting, and I resonated with him. He had accomplished what I needed to do. He was over 100 pounds, and so I asked him after the meeting if he would sponsor me, and he said sure, and so he broke it down for me, and he said that, he goes, we're going to work the OA program as if it were an AA program, because we're going to clearly define what we're abstaining from, just like in AA, you're sober, you don't drink. He goes, in OA, we have to clearly define what it is we don't eat. Not so much the food, but what it's made of. Specifically, flour and sugar. He said, flour and sugar are off the table, and we'll start from there. And I said, okay. And so we came up with a meal plan that reflected that. And he explained to me that abstinence and a meal plan are two separate things. My abstinence is what I was abstaining from. My meal plan was the structure by which I ate. And to this day, I ate 3 meals a day, nothing in between, no flour, no sugar, no sooner than 3 hours and no further than 5 hours apart. And the clock starts when I eat breakfast, and that's my meal plan. My abstinence is I don't eat flour or sugar, or drink alcohol. I'm also sober in AA. And so anyway, in the beginning, I did that for 3 days, and I got some clarity and lost my mind, and I fired him. And so I said, I can't do this anymore. You guys are crazy. I'm out of here. And I went on a 2-month binge, and I gained 50 pounds in 2 months. And having 6 months earlier just come out of the hospital suicidal, which I still was at that time. Nothing had changed, I knew where I was headed, and I didn't want my leg being amputated again if it were to infect again. So I went back to him, and I asked him if he would work with me again, and he said, sure. But he said, nothing's changed, man. He goes, you have to stay sober. You have to stay abstinent. And we got to go through the steps and have the spiritual awakening that the book talks about. And so I did. And during that process, I lost over 100 pounds, worked the steps. And then I sponsor people today. And I don't sponsor with the OA literature. I sponsor through the big book of the AA 1212, because that's the way I was taken through the process. And today I understand that there are certain things that I just can't, like it says in the doctor's opinion, that I can't eat. There's when I put certain things in my bloodstream, it triggers an allergy of the body, like it talks about in the doctor's opinion. And to have an allergy means to have an adverse reaction to something. And one of the things that helped me understand that information was we did a food inventory in the beginning, and he asked me to make a list of there was okay foods, iffy foods, and danger foods. And the okay foods were the foods that I knew, or the okay foods were the foods that I did not binge on. For example, I hate liver, can't stand it. No problems there. I don't binge on oatmeal. I don't binge on chicken. But I do binge on cakes and cookies and pastas and things like this, bread. And then the iffy foods were the ones that I wasn't sure about, of course, and then the danger foods were the ones that I knew I binged on. I would eat whole loaves of bread, whole pizzas, whole cakes, whole packs of cookies, dozens of donuts, and so forth. So when I made this list, this food inventory, he asked me, he said, it was okay, would you agree that the foods in the danger column either have flour or sugar or both? And I said, yes. And he said, would you agree that the foods in the okay column have little or none of those flour and sugars? I said, yes. And he goes, well, I think what we've established here is that when you put flour and sugar in your bloodstream, it triggers you physically. And, and you're driven to eat more of those things or like things, And he goes, and that over time leads to ill health and weight gain, because that's why you did what you did yourself, And then he asked me, he goes, have you ever eaten a dozen donuts or a whole cake or a pack of cookies? And I said, of course. He goes, well, have you ever eaten a dozen bananas or a dozen oranges or apples at a time? And I was like, no. And that helped me to understand that there were certain substances that when I, being of the addictive temperament, when I put those things in my bloodstream, the book talks about how that sets us apart as a distinct entity. We're different than normal people. And when I put those things in my bloodstream, it drives me to continue to do it. And I lose control to stop ad infinitum. It just goes on and on. And so he taught me that, so like the book says, all backed up with the big book, that I needed to arrest the illness. I needed to stop using the substance, in this case, flour and sugar. And then I needed to work the steps and change my spiritual sphere, my connectedness with God. And that would give me the power to stay abstinent. And that the weight loss would be a side effect of that. The reason why I'm abstinent today is to keep my mind and body clear so that I can live by spiritual principles. This isn't a weight loss program. My sponsor taught me that if the goal is to lose weight, then the anorexics and the bulimics win. If that's what you want to do, just go ask them what they do and do that, if that's your goal. What's that? Oh, and so I said, okay. So we got busy with the step work and through the steps, in order, 1 through 12, and thoroughly, studying the book and with my sponsor and working, the steps and doing my inventory and making my way up to the amends process. The process will change you spiritually. And the goal is to, there are principles, that are attached to the steps. And the goal, as I understand it, as I've been taught, and what I share with my sponsors is to, as we go through the steps, is to adjust my being and the way I live to those new standards. And the book talks about that, the big book, that I have to abandon my old ideas, ways of living and thinking, and adopt new ones that are spiritually based, that keep me connected, with God. And I understand today that the problem isn't the food per se. And I know people will argue that in the rooms, but the food is a problem, but it's not the problem. The problem is me and my thinking, and the fact that I, at my core, I want to live spiritually disconnected. I'm lazy, I'm undisciplined, and I had to be taught new ways of living that keep me connected. And the problem, as I've been taught, is a unconscious disconnectedness from God. Unaware of what I'm doing, I'm disconnected, therefore I'm screwed, basically. And the solution is a conscious connectedness with God. I have to be aware of the problem, and then I have to consciously make an effort through prayer, meditation, and service, and self-sacrifice for others to stay connected spiritually. And that gives me the power to stay abstinent. And the weight loss, like I say, is a side effect of all that. And I've been taught that the only step that mentions food or alcohol is the first one. There's a reason for that. Because once it's addressed, like it says in the book, that all these things would be pointless and academic if our friend never took the first drink. if you don't set the cycle in motion by eating what you're addicted to, then you no longer suffer the ramifications of that physically. And there's no point in discussing it because it's a done deal. What deserves the attention is the spiritual being and the spiritual life, and what are you doing for somebody else? How are you being of service to other people? You know, how are you connecting yourself with God? That's the deal on a daily basis. That's the working of the program. And I've learned that it's very difficult to do that without the guidance of a sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor, I suggest that you get one today. And follow the direction. You know, it's a concept that we're familiar with already. When you go to your tax man, your mechanic, or a doctor, you know, you're going to somebody that has knowledge of a condition that you have or a problem you have, and you turn your problem over to that person. You turn your car over, or you turn your tax papers over, or you turn your body over to your doctor, and you say, "Here, it hurts when I do this. You know, what does that mean, and how can we fix it?" Well, sponsors like that. You go to them from a position of submission. It's not to be negotiated. You know, your position, your relationship with your sponsor is not negotiable. You know, that was something that my first sponsor made clear to me. And I remember he poked me in the chest. He was telling me this. He said, "Ken," he goes, "let's get one thing straight." He said, "You came to me. I didn't come to you." You know? And this is after I had fired him and then came back asking him for help. You know, but he said, if you want to do this thing, I'm more than willing to help you. But if you waste my time, because you can lose my number and go do what you want to do. And at that point, I was in a position where I was willing to listen and surrender. You know, I was done. It's okay. And I'm grateful that he did that, because I needed that kind of, direction. Now, I wouldn't do that to somebody today. I don't put hands on people, but I think he knew that I needed that type of instruction at the time, you know. And, yeah, get a sponsor, work the steps, don't be afraid, be thorough, you know, and get truly abstinent. You got to get, you know, people like to discuss that in the rooms and debate it about what does abstinence mean and what is it. But my understanding and my experience is that from a 12-step perspective, the book talks about entire abstinence or entire sobriety. You know, what does that mean? It means you have to, you know, again, follow in the direction of a sponsor, because that's why you get a sponsor, right, is to have them explain to you what the deal is, and get truly abstinent, because the book also talks about that in the back in the stories and in 12 and 12 that it's not compatible to not be sober and to work the steps. It doesn't work like that. You know, if you're actively using a substance, in this case food, or, you know, dial it down to flour and sugar, in my experience, it's not feasible, you know, to work the step. It doesn't work. You know, at some point, you know, the individual washes out. That's been my experience in sponsoring people, and my personal experience too in the program. So you have to be, you know, truly abstinent, if you will. And in my experience, that means no flour, no sugar. It's a medical fact that those things are addictive in nature. And if you don't think so, stop eating it for a few days. You'll find out. If you get a change in state, you get real irritable, and you probably hit the nail on the head, you know. And you know, and that's the deal. You got to get a sponsor, get abstinent, work your steps, and it will give you a better life. My life today is better than I ever thought possible, you know. I've gone further at my job, health-wise, and all that I ever did prior to the program. I have a conscious connectedness with God, my Creator, today. And I pray every day. Say again?
1 minute.
1 minute? Okay. Thank you. And yeah, and I'm grateful for that. You know, God, it gives me guidance and strength every day. And so if you're new, welcome to OA. I highly suggest that you get a sponsor. And like I said, don't be afraid, man. We're here to help you. My number is 714